You know that feeling when you're walking alone at night and something just feels wrong? When every shadow seems to move and every sound makes your heart skip? Well, what I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you think you know about the darkness that surrounds us. Because some creatures don't just live in our nightmares. They feed on our fear, and they're far closer than you ever imagined. 3 weeks ago, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a leather journal, its pages yellowed with age, and a note that simply read, "You need to know the truth." What I found written in those pages has changed everything I believed about the supernatural world. The journal belonged to Dr. Sarah Chen, a paranormal researcher who disappeared without a trace last year. Her final entries describe encounters with entities that exist in the spaces between our world and something far more sinister. Let me tell you about the shadow feeders. According to Dr. Chen's research, these aren't your typical ghost stories or urban legends. These creatures are ancient, predatory beings that have learned to adapt to our modern world. They don't just haunt old houses or abandoned hospitals. They've evolved to infiltrate our everyday lives, feeding off the negative emotions we generate in our increasingly stressed society. The first documented encounter Dr. Chen recorded happened in a corporate office building in downtown Chicago. Employees reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread during late-night overtime shifts. Security cameras captured dark shapes moving through hallways, but only on the periphery of the footage, always just out of clear view. Workers began experiencing sleep paralysis, vivid nightmares, and an inexplicable compulsion to return to the building even during their days off. What makes shadow feeders particularly terrifying is their intelligence. Unlike mindless supernatural entities, these creatures study their prey. They learn our routines, our fears, our weaknesses. Dr. Chen discovered they can manipulate electromagnetic fields, which explains why people often feel their phones getting warm or experience sudden battery drainage in their presence. They use our own technology against us, creating an environment of constant unease. But the shadow feeders aren't the only entities Dr. Chen documented. Her journal describes something called the Hollow Ones, creatures that were once human but have been completely consumed by whatever dark force creates these beings. Unlike zombies or vampires from popular culture, the Hollow Ones retain their memories and personalities, making them the perfect infiltrators. They can maintain relationships, hold jobs, and appear completely normal, all while slowly draining the life force from everyone around them. The most chilling entry in the journal describes Dr. Chen's encounter with the Hollow One, who had been posing as a grief counselor for over a decade. This entity specifically targeted people who had lost loved ones, feeding on their sorrow and despair while pretending to help them heal. The entity would encourage clients to dwell on their loss, to revisit traumatic memories repeatedly, essentially creating an endless buffet of negative emotions. What's particularly disturbing is how these creatures reproduce. Dr. Chen's research suggests they don't multiply through bites or infections like traditional monsters. Instead, they convert humans through prolonged exposure to concentrated despair and hopelessness. The process is gradual, taking months or even years. Victims slowly lose their empathy, their ability to feel genuine joy, until they become hollow shells that exist only to feed on others' emotions. The journal reveals that certain locations act as breeding grounds for these entities, places where trauma has occurred repeatedly. Hospitals, prisons, sites of historical tragedies become supernatural magnets. But modern locations pose new threats. Social media companies, news organizations focused on negative content, and even certain entertainment venues create the perfect emotional environment for these creatures to thrive. Dr. Chen identified several warning signs of supernatural predation. Victims often experience chronic fatigue that doesn't improve with rest, persistent feelings of being watched, electronic devices malfunctioning around them, and most tellingly, a gradual loss of hope that seems disproportionate to their actual circumstances. Friends and family members typically notice personality changes before the victims themselves realize something is wrong. The final entries in the journal become increasingly desperate. Dr. Chen realized she was being stalked by multiple entities after her research got too close to exposing their existence. She described feeling constant surveillance, finding evidence that her apartment had been searched, and experiencing what she called temporal displacement, losing hours of time with no memory of what happened. Her final entry is dated just 2 days before she disappeared. She wrote about discovering a network of these entities operating in major cities across the world, coordinating their activities in ways that suggested a hive mind or central intelligence. She believed they were preparing for something bigger, using human suffering as fuel for some larger supernatural event. The most terrifying part of this story? The package I received wasn't random. Since reading Dr. Chen's journal, I've experienced everything she described. The feeling of being watched, the electronic malfunctions, the overwhelming despair that seems to come from nowhere. I think they know I have the journal, and I think they're coming for me next. So the next time you feel that inexplicable dread, that sensation that something is fundamentally wrong with your surroundings, don't dismiss it. Trust your instincts, because in a world where creatures feed on our darkest emotions, ignorance isn't bliss. It's exactly what they're counting on.